She got her head shoved into a pillow. During this, she said, "I love you," and it stopped for a brief moment.
On the evening of October 29, 2007, at 10:30 p.m., a fisherman was out on Galveston Bay when the wind began to pick up. Realizing he couldn't fish comfortably, he decided to move about 1 mile south of his usual spot. Once he reached the new location, he turned off the engine and dropped anchor, ready to get back to fishing. That's when he spotted something unusual on the shore of a deserted island nearby, a blue plastic container. Curious, he decided to check it out. As he turned the container over, a sense of dread washed over him. It was heavy, and the sound from inside was dull, unlike the clattering noise you'd expect from tools or fishing gear. Inside, he found a black trash bag. Fearing the worst, he cautiously opened the bag and saw a little girl's shoe and what looked like human remains. Shocked and horrified, he left everything as it was and immediately called 911. The fisherman remained at the scene until the police and investigators from the Galveston Sheriff's Department arrived. They confirmed that the container held a child's body, and Sergeant Mike Berry was assigned to the case. While deputies scoured the island for any clues but found none, the detectives could only wait for the medical examiner's report, who needed to thoroughly examine the contents of the container. Given that it involved a child and the body was significantly decomposed, the tests and analyses were prioritized. The initial findings gave Berry and his team a crucial lead. The girl was estimated to be between 2 and 5 years old, and her death was clearly not accidental. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, which couldn't have resulted from a simple fall. The force and speed of the blow to the back of her head indicated a deliberate act. Although there were several possible scenarios, it was evident that this was no accident or minor injury. After receiving the initial report, investigators realized they were dealing with a deliberate act of violence against the child. The Galveston Sheriff's Department did everything in their power to publicize the case, aiming to attract any potential witnesses who might help the investigation. However, they quickly found themselves at a dead end. In need of expertise, the detectives turned to FBI experts. Special Agent Don Gay, known for his extensive experience in the Galveston, Texas area, was considered the best for handling such sensitive cases. Additional FBI agents were brought in to assist Don. They started by interviewing the Coast Guard to figure out how the container might have ended up there. Was it thrown from a bridge or perhaps dropped from a ship? The local Coast Guard was straightforward, explaining that it was impossible to determine. Given the proximity to the Houston shipping channel, which sees daily traffic from international ships, the girl could have come from another state or even another country. Meanwhile, investigators from the Galveston Sheriff's Department searched the local missing persons database, but there was no match for a child. Despite this, the FBI agents remained hopeful, unwilling to believe that the absence of a missing persons report indicated the parents' involvement in the child's death. No matter how much experience you have in crime investigation, cases like these are always beyond comprehension. Understanding that the girl might not be local and could be sought elsewhere, the FBI agents decided to engage the media from other countries to broadcast the story worldwide. The medical examiner also contributed extensively to the search effort. Using a sketch, they depicted the most likely appearance of the child. Thus, a photo of the charming child with blue eyes, light, curly, medium-length hair, dressed in a pink shirt and skirt, and wearing white tennis shoes with pink patterns was circulated. The Sheriff's Department held a press conference, displaying the small shoes found with the body and a sketch of the girl's face, hoping for identification. They also gave the mysterious victim the nickname Baby Grace.
Baby Grace is now America's child.
It may be a long process, but we're not going to quit until we figure it out.
The Baby Grace hotline received an overwhelming response, with over 1,000 calls in the first 48 hours. Callers included relatives or friends with children resembling the sketch, parents involved in custody battles who had not seen their children for months, grandparents separated from their grandchildren, and individuals who suddenly realized they had not seen a neighbor's child in a while. On November 2nd, investigators received a tip from Lamarck, Galveston County. A man reported that a girl resembling Baby Grace had lived across from him until her family unexpectedly moved away that night. Officers immediately went to check the house where they found abandoned children's clothing and a shoe very similar to Baby Grace's. As the search for the family continued, the police received a call from the manager of a local motel. The manager reported that a couple staying in one of the rooms had children's items, but no one had seen a child. The motel staff also found children's clothing and a photo of a child that closely resembled baby Grace in the room. Investigators quickly located the couple from the motel, but Grace was not their child, and the lead turned out to be a dead end. Later, they were able to track down the family from Lamarck, and to everyone's relief, their daughter was alive, well, and with them. Getting a DNA profile for the unknown girl took longer than usual for forensic experts because the perpetrator was careful not to leave any traces and clearly didn't want the girl to be identified if found. The container had a lot of traces of household chemicals, possibly bleach or a similar chlorine-containing substance. Baby Grace's DNA was compared with samples from families across the country. This was the only way to check most of the leads from the hotline. The FBI even got a call from Portugal about Madeleine McCann, a 4-year-old girl from the UK who had disappeared. She vanished from her room while on vacation with her parents. Special Agent Don Gay contacted American attachés in Spain and Portugal, who sent a DNA sample to the US. However, Madeleine's DNA didn't match baby Grace's profile. It seemed the FBI was searching for a needle in a haystack. The investigation had hit a dead end, and detectives were in desperate need of a lead to restore hope that their efforts were not in vain. They found one when 2 fishermen came forward with a report. A few days before baby Grace was discovered, they were fishing in the same bay where her body was found when they saw something suspicious. The friends were fishing at a boat dock in Hitchcock late at night when an old model car towing a boat pulled up. The man and woman didn't have fishing rods, only a blue container. They launched their boat and headed into Galveston Bay, returning about an hour later without the plastic container. The woman was sobbing in tears as they pulled in. The fishermen couldn't identify the make of the car, but the police speculated that the couple probably lived in Texas, as they seemed familiar with the area and navigated the bay purposefully in near total darkness. The police attempted to locate the car and its owner, but their efforts were futile. A man and woman in an old car in Texas was a very weak lead. Instead, detectives placed their hopes on a candlelight memorial service for baby Grace, held in Galveston. The story had deeply affected everyone, and many people came that evening to honor the memory of the unnamed girl. Grace had become America's child, and the grieving citizens, her family. FBI agents and Galveston Sheriff's Department officers were present, blending into the crowd, hoping the perpetrator might appear. One of the fishermen was also there, as he could potentially identify the couple. Soon, Sergeant Mike Berry noticed a woman who stood out among the mourners. She was crying loudly and attentively listening to the speech about the deceased girl, as if she was experiencing personal grief. Berry approached the fisherman and asked if this woman resembled the one he and his friend had seen in Hitchcock. The man confirmed it. Detectives planned to follow the woman to get her car's license plate number and eventually her identity. However, their plan was thwarted by the crowd. The mysterious woman managed to slip away before the agents could reach her through the large number of people. Despite weeks of searching, they were unable to find her. The detectives then considered another possibility. They speculated that the woman and her partner might have come across the body before the fisherman did, and, to avoid suspicion, decided to dispose of it. Overall, this theory seemed plausible. While investigators continued their search, 47-year-old Cheryl Sawyers, over 1,500 miles away in Mentor, Ohio, called the hotline asking them to check on her granddaughter, Riley Ann Sawyers. Cheryl had seen information about baby Grace on the internet, and a bad feeling had stayed with her ever since. The girl in the sketch haunted her, particularly the pink top and skirt with purple tennis shoes that caught her eye. She vividly remembered buying that outfit for her 2-year-old granddaughter. Cheryl personally picked out nearly all of Riley's clothes, and the colors struck a chord with her for a reason. During their walks, they often visited stores together, where Cheryl let Riley choose her clothes, and Riley always selected pink and purple items. Cheryl, who had lived with her since her birth, hadn't seen the little girl in several months. Riley's mother, Kim Trenner, was divorced and embroiled in a custody battle with Cheryl's son, Robert Sawyers. Despite Kimberly moving to a different house with Riley, Cheryl and Robert continued to spend all their free time with the child until Kimberly and Riley suddenly vanished. The Sawyers family later discovered that Kim had married a man named Royce Ziegler and relocated to Texas. On November 10th, officers visited Royce's house. They had to wait as nobody was home, but soon Royce Ziegler arrived with Kimberly Trenner. Royce easily identified himself and confirmed that he and his daughter had a wife named Riley. However, it turned out that Riley was not currently living with them. Ziegler informed the officers that Ohio's Child Protective Services had taken Riley Ann Sawyers into custody following false allegations of child neglect. Kimberly Trenner supported her husband's account and provided a faxed letter supposedly from the Ohio agency. Naturally, the officers were skeptical. Any officer in the US knows that when an incident involving a person registered in one state, such as Ohio, occurs in another state, like Texas, it's the authorities in the latter state who are responsible for the case. Regardless of where you were born, where you live, or where you spent yesterday, if you are attacked in Washington, the case falls under Washington's jurisdiction. Nonetheless, the detectives contacted Ohio's CPA to verify their suspicions. The outcome was as expected. They didn't take Riley into custody and didn't send any letters to Kimberly. Investigators weren't sure if Riley was baby Grace, but there was something strange about this family. Mike Berry decided to ask Kimberly for a DNA sample. When she met with the sergeant, she brought a lawyer, who seemed odd to Berry since they only needed a swab from her cheek. However, Kim Trenner started talking and provided much more information.
Riley is baby Grace.
Riley is baby Grace?
I'm positive.
Kimberly began explaining what happened to Riley Ann. She said that Royce had a habit of punishing their daughter for any misbehavior. Supposedly, Ziegler got fed up with what he considered the bad behavior of a 2-year-old, so on July 25th, he decided to stay home to discipline Riley.
He decided to stay home from work. He really wanted to stay home and make sure I was disciplining Riley. He said, "We need to break her." She screamed. She had a belt wound. She got her head shoved into a pillow.
This horror continued throughout the day, but the most horrifying thing was that Riley's own mother not only failed to protect her daughter, but also assisted her sick husband just to keep him satisfied.
He wanted me to shove her head underwater. And I found myself doing that and hitting her with the belt because that's what he was doing. It just seemed like it went on and on and on.
At one point, they stopped to give Riley some medicine for her fever and to ice her wounds.
During this, she said, "I love you," and it stopped for a brief moment.
She said that to him.
And she had said that to me. I think she had said that to him.
However, this continued until Riley Ann lost consciousness.
It looked like she didn't have control over her legs anymore. So he held her for a little bit, and he tried to get her to stand a couple more times, but she couldn't. I could just feel her going cold, and we had a heating pad on her because we thought she was so cold from the ice. He knocked my arm.
Kimberly also revealed that she and Royce didn't even consider calling 911. Instead, they immediately went to a store to buy garbage bags, a blue plastic container, and other supplies. They bought bleach to destroy all DNA evidence, then placed her in a box and left her in the garage to decompose for almost 2 months in the summer heat.
One night, he decided that we needed to get rid of it. He really ideally wanted to keep it there, but it was starting to smell in the heat. I was an emotional wreck because I knew my daughter is dead in that box in that storage shed right there. And he decided it would be better if we took and moved.
Under the cover of darkness, they drove to Galveston and threw the container off a bridge. After confessing, Kim informed investigators that a few days earlier, Royce Ziegler had attempted to take his own life. According to her, he left a suicide note confessing to the crime. When officers arrived at Ziegler's home, they found him unharmed and cooperative. However, after being taken into custody, he told a completely different story. Ziegler claimed he was asleep when he heard Kim screaming at Riley. It was only after leaving the bedroom that he realized something terrible had happened and the girl was in bad shape. He blamed his wife entirely, and the investigators needed to determine the truth. FBI agents and sheriff's detectives searched the couple's residence. In the garage, they found a suicide note in which Royce indeed took the blame for what happened. They also found a list of rules that Ziegler had written for 2-year-old Riley. Despite the compelling evidence against Royce, the prosecution decided to charge both Royce Ziegler and Kimberly Trenner. Kimberly never attempted to stop him and actively participated in the crimes. experts suggest that Kim did this out of fear of losing her husband. She wanted to preserve her life with him, with Riley, or without. However, being in custody didn't prevent Kimberly from giving birth to another child while awaiting trial, this time a son. Royce told her that if she was pregnant, law enforcement and the court would be more lenient toward her. Fortunately, prosecutors saw through this, exposing the couple's true nature to the court and jury. The idea of pregnancy was clearly not spontaneous. While not proven, it is not excluded that Kim was supposed to take the blame and, being pregnant, receive a lighter sentence. But the most crucial question remains: what really happened? So, do you recall these moments?
It looked like she didn't have control over her legs anymore. So he held her for a little bit, and he tried to get her to stand a couple more times, but she couldn't.
Riley was no longer able to stand on her own, and Royce held her up. At one point, he lost control and grabbed Riley by the hair, lifting her and forcefully pushed her to the floor. This resulted in her injury, exposing her small body to the cold after spending the entire day in the hands of a psychopathic monster, and seemingly the devil in the form of her own mother. The jurors didn't hesitate for a second. On February 2, 2009, Kimberly Trenner was found guilty of a crime punishable by death, but unfortunately, those present didn't insist on the death penalty. Instead, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 38 years. All participants in the trial cried uncontrollably. For Cheryl and Robert Sawyers, the trial seemed harder than for anyone else. Riley Ann was deeply cherished by her family, and they couldn't imagine any harm coming to her, especially at the hands of her mother. Later that year, Royce Ziegler was also convicted and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The couple's newborn child was placed in the care of their relatives. The location in Galveston where Riley Ann Sawyers was discovered was renamed in her honor. She was laid to rest in her hometown in Mentor, Ohio. Cheryl and Robert Sawyers asked Sergeant Mike Berry, FBI Special Agent Don Gay, and their colleagues to attend the funeral. This request deeply touched them, as it marked the end of a heart-wrenching story that will forever remain with them. While Robert Sawyers has built a family and become the father of 2 boys, he still mourns Riley and is grateful for the time he had with this angel in his life.